Hello and welcome to the Okanagan Reader. I'm your host, Jim Bowering. There won't be any location revealed today. That's for tomorrow's remote video. Today's reading is Chapter 38 of Green Comet, the first book in the Green Comet trilogy. In Chapter 38, we're shown the observation post where the 5 will be spending the foreseeable future. 2 would be on shift at all times while 3 were in light hibernation. When the scout arrives, the 3 sleepers are awoken. The little comet bravely fights the deadly scout. Looks like things are getting serious. All right then. Here we go then.
Chapter 38. The Scout Arrives. The observation post was an irregularly shaped cavity right at the end of a corridor. Green Comet's habitable area was extending in that direction, and the cavern was about to be modified and incorporated when the visitor put such plans on hold. Now it would be the comet's only habitable area for the next few years. It was 7 kilometers from the center, where everyone was sleeping, connected by a series of natural fractures in the body of the comet. On the scale of the comet, the fractures were trivial and shouldn't catch the scout's attention. They were part of a network of faults in that area, only one of a number of such networks in the comet. Trivial on that scale, it provided unimpeded passage for small things like people. Of course it wasn't pressurized, so they would have needed pressure suits if they wanted to use it. But with the corridors gone, it was their only way of getting around. Like the hibernarium, the observation post was protected by an arrangement of broken ice that would refract the scout's radar. It was a random-looking jumble that nevertheless produced a very specific result. The scout would not be able to resolve any definite images of the space behind the shield. No matter how many times its radar passed by, it wouldn't be able to collect enough data to see what was there. It would find the same thing at the center and several other unrelated places throughout the comet. Overall, though, it would be able to see over 99% of the comet, so it would be encouraged to believe its investigation was sufficiently thorough. Their enclosure, which was only a small fraction of the size of the cavern it was built in, was constructed to mimic the shape of the larger cavity. They hoped that by blending in with the natural form, they would stand out that much less. They didn't exactly replicate its shape on a smaller scale. Rather, they used the suggestions of similarity that are often found on different scales in natural formations. As Stanton put it, they just slid things over a few degrees here and there. It contained quite a large volume for their living area. There was no need to skimp, given what was available, and they were planning to spend a long time there, so the more the better. If the scout arrived on estimate, they would be there for over 4 years, and given the error bars and uncertainties, it could be as long as 10. In practice, if the scout didn't show up at all, they didn't know how long they would go on just to be sure. They needed plenty of room to protect their mental health during the long confinement. The doctor said, "We need room to stretch our wings, in every sense." The main part of the observation post was relatively small, and to everyone's amusement, they spent most of their time there. It was the operations room, containing most of their monitoring equipment, and it was natural for them to be there. It was roughly rectangular, although the top was highly irregular for camouflage. It was about 5 meters wide and 8 long, with the equipment collected at one end. The rest of the space was taken up by the other room. That's what they called it. There was the ops room and the other room. Its minimum dimension was 10 meters, but in reality it was much bigger with the ceiling angled upward. They had enough room in there that they could play catch with a flashball when they needed the exercise. It housed all the activities that weren't strictly operational, such as eating and sleeping, although they ended up snacking and napping in the ops room much of the time. To conserve resources and preserve their sanity, they weren't going to spend all of the time awake. There were to be 3 people in light hibernation at all times, with 2 awake and on duty. Each person would be awake for 2 months and asleep for 3 on a repeating cycle. They would spend 1 month with each of 2 partners, overlapping their shifts. The schedule was left to an algorithm to draw up, reasoning that any combinations it could come up with would work at least as well as whatever they might try to arrange themselves. It wasn't entirely random, though. Stanton altered one variable to ensure that Elgin would overlap with Francis. No one objected to that. None of them would have it any other way. As for everyone else, they were all happy with whatever they got. The first shift went to Elgin and Stanton. After 1 month, Francis would come up and Stanton would go down. Next up was the doctor, and finally Nigel. Elgin would come to think of those months spent with Fran as his golden age. He thought he had already entered it when they met, and she, inexplicably, stuck with him. Anyone looking at them would have concluded the same thing. It was very special, but these months spent alone together were so much more. They provided the opportunity to experience a lifetime of intimacy in a few focused days. Elgin would look back on them with gratitude and regret. Right now, though, he was on shift with Stanton again, just beginning their 7th stint. The brief precautionary overlap with Nigel was done, Elgin was declared officially awake and fit for duty, and Nigel was beginning his 3 months of downtime. They were a week into their shift, and they were doing their daily calculation and plotting of Stanton's bubble. "I can't believe we almost forgot it," Stanton mused for the umpteenth time. "Me neither," said Elgin. "I guess everybody thought everybody else was taking care of it." He started the program, and they watched as it constructed the diverging paths being followed by Green Comet and Stanton's bubble. They were never in any real danger of forgetting the bubble. It just slipped everyone's mind for a while. They remembered and were about to smash it when Francis suggested waiting. Then, over the years, people visited the bubble to think, often just before going down to the center. Most of them left mementos in the bubble. When it was time to finally deal with it, Fran convinced them to remove it intact, to send it on its own independent exploration of the galaxy. "Do you think anyone will ever find it?" asked Stanton. This wasn't the first time the question was asked by Stanton or anyone. Probably everyone on Green Comet had wondered about that. It was the kind of wistful exercise of the imagination that came naturally to them, given not only their nature, but their unique circumstances. Buried under the lightness of speculation was a darker, morbid motivation. It was possible that they would not survive this, and Stanton's bubble might be the only enduring evidence of their existence. That little ice sphere, and its eclectic contents, could end up being the only thing left to tell the universe that they were here. With his mind full of those thoughts yet again, Elgin said, "Probably not." Stanton nodded. "Yeah," he said, "but it's nice to think about." Elgin had a new thought. "The odds of happening upon it might be close to 0, he said, "but we know where it is. Maybe after all this is over, we could mount an expedition to recover it." Stanton looked up with a flash of hope. Then he laughed at himself. "I doubt that will be a priority," he said. "If we get through this, we're going to have a lot of other work to do, more important work." He shook his head. "Retrieving the bubble wouldn't be a priority if I was in charge." "Well," said Elgin with a grin, "you won't always be in charge. Maybe you'll wake up after an 80-year nap, and your bubble will be back." Stanton snorted, but Elgin could see the idea pleased him. They were interrupted by a quiet but insistent beeping. "Radar," said Elgin, pouncing on the monitor. 39 gigahertz. It's the little comet." It was beginning. The plan was for the little comet to probe the Scout with radar when it was within a few light seconds. That was assuming that they would detect its arrival ahead of time. If it surprised them, then the radar would come on immediately. Not that they thought it would do them any good. They knew that anyone who'd used radar on the visitor before was quickly destroyed. The purpose of this probing was to hit the Scout with a powerful beam, knowing that some of it would reflect to Green Comet. This would both alert them and provide them with some data. This was supposed to happen automatically, but now they assumed it was being controlled by Buzzard and his crew. The radar signal lasted for approximately 7 seconds, and before it ended their telescope picked up a flash on the little comet. 1 second, said Elgin. It took the scout 1 second to target the radar source. That's assuming a distance of 3 light seconds, said Stanton. He consulted the radar data, doing a quick mental calculation. That's about right. They're right on plan. Look at this, said Elgin. There was more information, received by their cosmic ray antenna. It's a bunch of data about the scout, position and momentum and so on. But before they could absorb that, there was more radar. In the next 2 to 3 minutes, they received 16 radar signals in total. Then it all stopped. That's when Elgin pushed himself away from the console. Time to wake everybody up, he said, flying into the other room. He left Stanton scanning their instruments intently, and he knew his mentor and friend was filled with both hope and fear for Buzzard. Elgin couldn't see much cause for hope. It looked as though whatever defenses the little comet had were spent, and now the end was just a matter of time. It was hard to piece together, especially accounting for the extra 3-second delay with the reflected radar. As a working hypothesis, he imagined the radar was first, then it would be destroyed by the scout, followed by the cosmic ray message. Repeated for a total of 16 times, the net result was a lot of data for Green Comet, but Elgin couldn't see how it helped the little comet at all. He was churning through that line of thought repeatedly as he set the controls to begin the process of waking the rest of the crew. Realizing he was distracted, he went over the procedure until he was sure he had it right, then he went over it again. All the controls were properly set, all the gauges were in their nominal ranges, and all the indicators were green. He went over it one more time, and then headed back to the ops room. There was an hour until the next time the automated reanimation procedure would require intervention again. Look at this, said Stanton as he came in. It was a simulation of the event, using the available data, including imaging of the scout after their optical telescope found it. It added a whole new angle to Elgin's hypothesis, because there were also flashes on the scout. Little Comet was fighting back. They cheered and celebrated their friend's little victory. So, said Elgin, first there's the radar from the comet, then the scout kills the radar, then something from the comet, maybe a laser, shoots the scout's weapon, and finally there's the cosmic ray message. Yes, said Stanton, only I think the laser self-destructs when it fires, and sends the message at the same time. Oh yeah, I remember hearing that the power of a laser is limited by not wanting it to destroy itself. That's right. So Buzzard has pushed it beyond the limit, probably knowing that the scout would destroy it right away anyway. And he used the pulse of power to block any possibility of the scout detecting the cosmic ray message. They watched the simulation in silence. It was improving with each repetition, as the computer ran more thorough analyses of the data. Elgin added, although, with that explosion, I don't think it would matter if the scout intercepted the message. It probably wouldn't realize it. No, said Stanton. It would just look like debris from the explosion. He pointed at the screen. And look here. It shoots at the laser, even though it is already blown up. You're right, said Elgin, pondering. I think that says something about the visitor, or at least the scout. We'll have to remember to point that out to Fran when she wakes up. Right, said Stanton. And the fact that it reacted the same way every time. Each time it shot a radar, it lost the weapon to return fire, but it never altered its behavior. 16 radars and 16 lasers. Actually, that's the funny thing, said Stanton. Only 15 lasers. Nothing happened for a long time. The computer continued to refine its analysis, but with a lack of new data it wasn't able to show them anything different. The scout continued to get closer to the little comet, but there was no more activity between them. They could tell that the scout was probing the comet with its radar, though, because they were getting the reflections. They studied them intently, hoping they might pick up some indication of the people there. At the same time, they were hoping the scout wouldn't, an impossible conflict of desires. A chime sounded from the other room. Elgin tore himself away, saying, "I've got to go stir the soup," meaning it was time to go attend the wakers. He flew out of the room. The sleepers were almost up to temperature now. It was time to change the mixture of chemicals, to allow the metabolism to find its own equilibrium, and to let the brain become active again. He entered the new settings, and then checked the readouts to ensure that the automatic system did the right things. He had to monitor them for 15 minutes to make sure they stabilized before he could leave them again. He spent the time watching Frances, pleased to see the color and vitality return to her skin and fur. With a mixture of chemicals keeping their reactivated brains in a somnolent state, Elgin left them to continue their recovery and went back to the ops room. At that moment, Stanton cried, "No!" Elgin hurried back in and found Stanton with his hands covering his head, and he saw a scene of chaos on the monitor. Where the little comet had been, there was a cloud of snow, and, as they watched, the comet came out of the cloud in two halves. It was obvious that the scout had attacked with a vengeance. Stanton covered his face, and Elgin heard his soft, "Ah, buzzard."